Thank you for joining the American Crochet Association and following our Granny Square Table Runner Crochet Along Challenge. I'm Selena Baca, founder, host, lead educator with the ACA, and in this video, I'm going to be going over part 3 of our Crochet Along Challenge. An outline of this chat can be found in the video description to include links to this challenge in our crochet membership, links to the pattern, our community, and more. Today's episode is sponsored in part by our American Crochet Association crochet members. Your ACA membership helps us to build courses, workshops, and training programs to support the crochet community and host fun episodes just like this one. You can learn more about the ACA membership and get started today when you click on the link in the show notes section after this chat. If you are watching on the replay, unfortunately, this is pre-recorded. My live functions just were not working today. Just come on over and comment on this video to say hello, let us know where you're viewing from, and follow along just like it's the live. I promise it's going to be the same great fun. If you're viewing this on any other platform other than YouTube, just know that it's typically going to be pre-recorded, but again, it's going to be the same great fun. After I outline part of this crochet along, I'm going to be going through some of our questions that we had this week. So I'm going to be answering some of those pertaining to this particular part. But again, if you are watching on the replay, if you have any questions that we haven't already addressed, go ahead and join our community or send us an email and we'll get right back to you. So again, today is part 3 of our Granny Square Table Runner Crochet Along Challenge. And I'm going to be giving you guys some tips for color changes and those joins. Now again, when you click on the link in the video description, crochet members, it's going to take you directly to your crochet membership. It looks just like this. And you're going to click on the crochet along section for the March Granny Square seam and join section. If you're not a member and you're watching this, when you click on the link for this particular part, it will give you options to join. So don't be shy about that. Again, our Crochet Along Challenge tells you everything that you need to know about this pattern, including how to get it for free for our crochet members only. Throughout this Crochet Along Challenge, it tells you how to add your project to Ravelry, how to check, because that's where we're going to be picking winners, and all of the different parts of this Crochet Along Challenge. Unfortunately, again, our live functions just were not working today. So part 3 is not live. I am pre-recording it, but I will update your members section with this video link as soon as it's done. So color changes and joins. Those are 2 huge aspects of this particular challenge here. Remember, we're making this Granny Square Table Runner, and color changes and that join as you go method is what makes this pattern design so unique and very specific looking. And those are also 2 really big learning objectives that we really want to make sure that we're making time for to build that skill and ability. So for those 2 particular parts, know that you can go to your learning path, because crochet members, you guys do get the learning path as part of your membership. And there's a few particular lessons you can go back to as part of that learning path, okay? So the 2 lessons I wanted you to pay particular attention to for color changes and joins will be the finishing course, and of course that's for the color changes so that you have some different techniques and methods. And for the joins, take a peek back at the seam and join lesson, specifically the join as you go course, because that's specifically going to help you here. Now, as you're looking over those 2 particular courses in the learning path for this crochet along, let's first pause and talk about the color changes. Maybe you've worked color changes before in the past, maybe you haven't, maybe you're just looking to try different kinds of color change methods. Maybe you're looking to try something different. It's a really good idea to do that, especially for this, because maybe you're making this with cotton, maybe you're making it with thread, maybe you're making it with a yarn that is harder to hide certain color changes. So maybe you want to try a few different techniques to really make sure that you've got a really beautiful right side facing out. And if you have anything on the back side or the wrong side, particularly pertaining to color changes and joins, that it's hidden on that side. So if you have not already gone back, if you've not already watched all of our different parts for this crochet along challenge yet, I encourage you to go back and do that, because there was a homework section, how to swatch, to kind of try all those different methods before you start working this finished project, right? So if you haven't done that yet, now would be a great time to do it, especially to try your color change and your join methods, okay? So again, for color changes, maybe try a few different things to make sure that whatever method you're using, that it looks good for this particular fabric and for the yarn that you're using. This is a great opportunity, again, depending on the yarn that you're using, that could make a huge difference, to see if you're going to knot your ends, are you going to weave in your ends, are you going to sew in your ends? Yarn and fabric has everything to do with which one of those methods you're going to be working. Also, what kind of project you have, how much use it's going to get, how well it will stand up to, is it going to be used daily? Is it going to be washed a lot? Is it going to be, moved a lot? What is the daily function of your granny square table runner going to be? Because that's really going to help you to determine that, and the fabric and the yarn you use, which one of those finishing methods you work into your project. And I can't stress it enough, definitely practice on 3 granny squares before you start your finished, before you start your for real project, because those 3 granny squares are going to be a great practice or swatch before you move on to your finished project. Okay, joins. For this particular project, we are using the join as you go method. That's just what this pattern calls for. If you're unfamiliar with how to work that, I do have some tips for you in addition to what you're going to learn in the seam and join course as part of your learning path, okay? So some tips here, if you're unfamiliar with that join, is that each granny square that you create, you're going to create one whole granny square. There's no joins for that one. It's going to be one complete square, but every square that you create after that is going to be joined to the last, but it's only going to be joined across one side. So there's a few things to really think about in that construction. You want to make sure that all of your granny squares are facing one direction. Your right side are all facing one side. Your wrong side are all facing the opposite side, and that way you have a very clear right side and a very clear back side. So that's one thing to really pay attention to as you're joining these. Another thing, if you're unfamiliar and you're really concentrating on your join technique, you can use stitch markers into the places where you want to join. So let's say you've just created granny square number 1, you're creating granny square number 2, and that's going to be joined here. Place stitch markers into each one of the join locations, which will be a chain 1 space across one side of your last granny square. So because you have a chain 3 space in each corner, you're going to join into this center chain. So you're going to skip one chain in the corner, join to the second, and then skip one chain corner. And that way it'll be even on both sides. Now, as you're joining, of course, your lesson in the learning path is going to explain this as well. And we do have video tutorials. So that way, not only can you read the technical instructions for the action, but you can also see it being worked. What you're going to do for the join as you go method is that you replace one chain with a slip stitch join. So what that means is as you're creating this second square here, so to speak, you're going to start in a corner, because you're going to join a corner to corner and then across and then corner to corner, and that's going to be one side. So as you're joining in this first corner, you're going to start with one chain, because there's 3 chains in this corner. After that one chain, you're going to replace the second chain with a slip stitch join to the last granny square created. So it's going to be chain 1, slip stitch join, chain 1. So not only have you joined, but you've also completed the appropriate stitch count for this to still be a corner. Then you're going to continue to work your pattern. Work 3 double crochet. Now you're coming up to another chain 1 space. And remember, you want this granny square to match in stitch count to this granny square. So that's why we're replacing this next chain 1 space with a slip stitch join. So instead of chaining 1 here after your double crochet, your 3 double crochets in the corner, instead of that chain 1, we're going to slip stitch to join into this adjoining chain 1 space for the last granny square. Again, that's going to give you a join, and it's also going to give you an even stitch count for this and this. Work your next 3 double crochets into the next chain 1 space. You're ready for your next chain 1 space, but we don't want that chain 1 space, we want to join. So we're going to slip stitch join here. Again, if you put stitch markers into each chain 1 join location, you'll know exactly where to join. You can even leave them in place after you join just to make sure that you're getting each one of them. So across one particular side, you should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 joining spaces. And then the same is going to be for every single granny square that you join after that. So using those stitch markers to mark those join locations are going to be really helpful, especially if you've never worked this before. I can't stress this enough. Make sure the right sides of every granny square is all facing the same direction. Right side, of course, is the side of the fabric that is facing you as you create each stitch and as you're creating that fabric. And since this work is not reversible, you're creating one right side, one back side, it is going to really look very different if not all of your squares are facing the same direction. Now, the last tip that I'll have for this particular section is you might feel like I need to block each one of these squares individually. Maybe they're crooked, maybe they're lopsided, maybe they're curling, maybe the fabric is just not laying nice and flat and they aren't perfect squares. Because you're joining each as you go, it's really difficult to block each individual square at this time because you're joining each one to the last. So instead of blocking each square individually, because they're being joined as you create each one, what I want you to do is wait until this entire project is completed and then block the entire thing. Now, I'll go back to in the beginning of this crochet along when I said make 3 granny squares and do all of these things. One of those things that you're going to do as you create those 3 granny squares is block that fabric. Now that's what you do pertaining to the swatch to see how you're going to block that fabric. But just because we block the swatches does not mean I want you to block just the joining squares, because that's not the entirety of the project. So again, complete the entirety of the project based on how you block just your 3 practice swatch granny squares. That's what you're going to, the best of what you did there, that's what you're going to apply to your finished project here. All right, guys, that's everything that I wanted to share pertaining to part 3 of this crochet along challenge. I did have some questions within our community, just a few. I only had a few. I think I've answered most of them, but the only one that I didn't answer yet as part of this was that, one of our users said, well, my granny square, it's slanted. So even after I blocked my granny square, it's still slanted. Why is that? It could be a few different things. And without looking at your granny square, it's hard to say this is exactly why. So what I would encourage you to do, if you're concerned about the look of your granny square, is share a picture either in our Facebook community, you can find a link in the video description, or you can just email us directly. You can find our email in the video description. It's support@AmericanCrochetAssociation.org. So in either case, we'll get right back to you with some support and help. But a few things that will cause your granny square to not be square, it could have to do with, or it might have something to do with maybe just your tension. Sometimes when we're working up a motif, especially if it has a lot of open spaces, it can look really misshapen, and that's why blocking is really a brilliant way to assure that the shape can be configured as you need it, right? So if it doesn't look square, if it looks a little misshapen, a blocking session will really help. If you feel you've already blocked it and it's still misshapen, you might want to change the way in which you're blocking your fabric. And that may have something to do with the kind of fabric that you're using. Are you using a 100% acrylic? In that case, acrylic can be suggested into place, but it doesn't really take shape. So if you are using a fiber like acrylic, it may not block into that perfect square that you're looking for. So that's another thing to consider as well. So outside of those few different tips, I look forward to seeing your granny square, and then maybe I can give you some specific advice on what to do to make it as nice and flat and square as possible. And with that, that is the end of this particular part of our Granny Square Crochet Along Challenge. I'm going to update this area right here with this chat, and I can't wait to hear your questions, comments, feedback, and I can't wait to see your finished granny square pictures so far. So definitely keep us updated with your progress. And as always, you can post those pictures directly in our Facebook group, link in the video description. We can't wait to see those. Next is going to be part 4 of our crochet along. Hopefully it'll be a live chat. Again, we had some last minute technical difficulties today, so it wasn't. We'll do everything that we can to assure that it is a live chat, but if not, we'll always assure that your questions, comments, and feedback make it to videos just like this, okay? All right, everyone, thank you so much for joining today. That concludes today's video. Now, please make sure that, again, if you have any questions, comments, feedback, we're just an email away, or you can always post those in our Facebook community. Until next time, peace, love, crochet.